Welcome to the Business of School podcast, brought to you by Coal Connect. Get ready for a journey of topical insights, engaging conversations, and maybe a few aha moments from the business, finance and technology side of schools. Coal School experts are your host, and with our guests from the world of education, we're about to embark on a learning adventure to support you in the business of your school. Matt is a passionate and dedicated student of exceptional performance. He founded Driven From Within with a desire to help schools and their teams engage in continuous and sustainable improvement. With a master's degree in leadership and organisational culture and application in real-world settings, Matt has discovered the power of the intentional, purposeful and skillful development of personal character and school culture. Welcome, Matt, to the Business of School podcast. Great to have you with us.
Thanks for having me in. Thanks
very
much for inviting me.
Influencing culture. What a great topic.
Absolutely.
Influencing culture in schools.
Yeah, it's a passion of mine.
I know it is, and I can't wait to get stuck into this with you. So,
looking forward to it.
What do you mean, first of all, then, by culture in schools?
There's probably multiple different definitions for culture, isn't there, Kenton? But so we probably try and create shared language with the schools that we work with pretty early, so we can work from some common definition. The way that we would view culture is what you believe, how you behave, and the experiences that you give to other people. So I suppose the behaviours are the manifestation of the initial beliefs, and the experiences then are the outcome of those things.
Yeah. So what I know from working with many schools, that's going to be different from school to school.
There's no such thing as a one-size-fits-all.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly one of our most deeply held values as a company is in around people, and this notion that one size fits one. So you can't take something that's worked at one organisation and go and just plug it into the next organisation and then think you're going to get the same result. It certainly doesn't work like that. Yeah. Even within an organisation, every team's actually got slightly different culture as well.
And I'm sure you're still seeing new ones.
All the time. Yeah, absolutely.
So in a school organisation, what is so crucial that everybody's committed to create that ongoing cultural process in the school?
First of all, I would think there is just heightening the understanding of the importance of organisational culture. So I guess the way we see it is that there's three levers you can pull to drive growth or accelerate change and that sort of thing. So you've got the strategic lever that you can pull,
which most people are familiar with.
Absolutely.
There's always something in process already with strategic planning.
Absolutely, every organisation, every good organisation will have some sort of strategic plan, and that's crucial. And the job of the plan, of course, is to name the objectives of the organisation and name some behaviours that might promote the progress towards those objectives.
But it's deeper than that, isn't it?
It's far deeper than that. But it's still an important part, and the other lever might be systems and structure. So what are the processes and policies that we've got in place to enable the behaviours we want to see? And those two levers are the easy ones to pull. And they're often pulled by every organisation. The challenging lever to pull is the people and culture space. And
that's probably because the principal is very much in tune with the strategic direction. You've got a business manager that's looking after putting the levers with the systems and the processes. So naturally, they're being addressed. But interestingly, you've got this third one.
It's a comfortable place to stay. It's a safe space to stay, isn't it? What we find is many leaders, not just in education, probably more broadly, but specifically in education, many leaders are coming into their roles because they've got some sort of expertise in some sort of technical aspect of the role, or perhaps tenure. They've been there for a long time, and now it's their turn. What we're seeing though is that when you come into a position of leadership, you move from being responsible for the job to being responsible for the people responsible for the job. That requires and calls for a whole different skill set altogether. And that's the space that we're absolutely almost obsessive about, to be honest, that people and culture space. Any organisation can write a compelling strategic plan, but once the plan's written, it's actually not worth the paper it's written on, because it hands execution over to people and culture. So if you've got a plan that calls for the behaviour of people that you're not investing in, I suppose you're almost forfeit any right to complain about outcomes that perhaps aren't being reached.
And especially in schools where all of your stakeholders are people. Like, you've got a student cohort, you've got your staff cohort, you've got your parents and community cohort. It's super important that this is looked at and managed by schools, and you're influencing it for good.
We would often look at an organisation. We use the language with people in schools often that an organisation is actually quite a mythical concept. There really is no such thing. It is just groups of people. and culturing is humanity's greatest invention. It's our weapon. It's our A game. It's what we've been doing for thousands of years. Yeah. And I suppose
it's a really good term to use in the context of leadership, isn't it?
Culturing. Yeah, I would look. I've said it a few times already this week with different groups I've been working with. If anyone ever offers you a culture program, you would be saying no straight away. It's just it's not start and stop. It's infinite in nature. Culturing, I think, is a better process because it's a verb. It's not a noun. It requires ongoing action. Yeah.
I bet. So let's have a look at how you see that being worked out in schools. You're working with leaders that are trying to influence the culture. Can you give us some examples where that's working really well, or what are you seeing them do?
First of all, there's a commitment to the ongoing work, an acknowledgement that it is infinite. Yeah. So we probably
is that a challenge for a lot of leaders? Or is that an easy sell?
It is. I would say challenging for more often than not, and not challenging in that people aren't wanting to engage in the work. Challenging in that the systems and structures don't always promote the work to take place. So you've got finite resources available to you, only a certain amount of professional learning, time slots available to you. There's core business that has to be taken care of, and now there's this big thing that's about people and culture as well. So sometimes leaders find it a challenge to where do we fit that piece in. And I suppose that's our role to help them navigate that. Well, we just can't leave it to chance. And it's about sort of trying to work out what can we do with what we've got available to us.
So what are you seeing working really well? Like what does a good influencing leader of culture look like?
I think first and foremost, one of the things is certainly that they're almost fanatical about identifying and developing next level leaders. So there's a real appetite to build leadership density within the organisation. When I say density, I don't mean create more badges with titles on it. I mean just allow everybody in the organisation the opportunity to engage in leadership development. What's working really well at some of the sites is the initiation of what we'd call cultural activation teams. So acknowledging that this is just too much for one person. It should nothing of value is achieved in isolation. And the principal's got, way too much on their plate to be able to invest attention and resource and focus into this necessarily. So that's where we come in and help establish a cultural activation team.
And what do those teams look like? How
it's different. It's slightly different at every organisation. Right. But I think, as I observe more and more now, I think they work best when it's a representation of school leadership, teaching staff, and ancillary and support staff. I think when there's that blend, I think that promotes really healthy conversation.
There's buy-in from all the areas.
Buy-in from all of the areas. There's leadership involved, which gives some decisional capacity, and that team, I suppose, acts as a conduit between what's happening on the floor and then being able to feed that back up to perhaps an executive team, and then therefore take meaningful action. So they're two things, leadership development and the cultural activation team. Also just a commitment to the ongoing process as well. Yeah.
And once you get some of these cultural programs in place that you're working with, these ongoing culturing, how much can you guys sort of step back and these things just then happen internally and organically and because people are on board and you've got the right structure in place?
Absolutely has to be sustainable because certainly what we don't want to happen is for us to step away and everything returns back to status quo. And there'll always be, human nature is to fight for status quo sort of thing.
But your role will change, I'm assuming, over the length of the process.
Yeah. So, I suppose what optimal would look like from our end is that there's some immersive time spent together early. So a good chunk of time, usually in what we call our prepare phase, which is actually just understanding what culture is. You can't influence it if you don't understand it. Then generally we would then release a little bit of responsibility and we might go into a school once or twice a term for a professional learning evening or a staff PD day. But once the cultural activation team is initiated, those teams then start to take over some of that PD. And what it looks like from my end is I just catch up with those teams, support them in, okay, what's the next conversation that needs to be had, and gradually release that responsibility. We wouldn't ever leave anybody on their own. We would always be doing at least a once a term check-in, but that would look slightly different at each school.
Yeah. So with the schools that are listening and haven't got some of these programs in place and maybe not even focus too much on the cultural aspects of the organisation. What can we say and discuss to encourage them to get involved and to start looking at this and not to leave it to chance?
Sure. Well, I think, and thanks for bringing that language up. That's the language I was going to use. I guess it's every organisation has a culture, and I think everybody would recognise that.
Any group of people.
Any group of people. And as I said, humanity has created culture to come together around shared language and behavioural expectation. So we're not debating that. Every organisation's got a culture. I think the reality is some of them are flourishing by design, some of them are existing on default, and some of them are slowly decaying. The risk is the ones that are existing on default can still be fantastic, can still be great.
Okay.
But what happens then is if the person or the people responsible for driving that culture up and leave, the risk is the culture goes with it as well.
Because they are the culture.
They are the culture, or they're the key influencers. They're the socially connected, socially respected people in the organisation. They play a key role in driving the culture. If they leave, and that culture's been allowed to exist on default, there's just too much risk in that.
And that's good you say that, because we're currently in a school environment where there's a whole heap of change going on.
Yeah.
Personnel are coming and going all the time.
Yeah.
People are trying to find new staff. People are leaving.
Yeah.
There's changes happening in structure. So there's a much higher risk of that happening.
Yes.
Like your luck's going to run out.
Yes, absolutely. And I think my sort of observations of what happened post-COVID was that people certainly recalibrated their perspective.
Yeah.
And certainly this is, certainly true in my own social network, that people actually started to take lower paying jobs or opt to go part-time instead of higher paying jobs for a greater contribution,
values have changed.
a greater sense of connection, greater sense of meaning, greater sense of purpose. The reality is culturing, it's our modern day currency. And I think we just, first of all, we've got to, as I said, switch the lights on, heighten our awareness about this, and then not leave it to chance. And the temptation is, if it's a great culture that's existing on default, we do just leave it to chance.
Yeah, but you want to maintain it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So find out what it is that makes it that way.
That's right. It has to be sustainable.
Nurture it.
Yeah. No, that's a great way. It's got to be consistently grown. Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. What are the tangible things that leaders could take away and begin implementing within their organisations tomorrow?
So I reckon an easy one's just to do a basic cultural audit, a little cultural audit.
What does that look like?
Yeah, so a low risk way of doing that for leaders would be a simple culture capture. And that sort of, I suppose that's a bit of a current state analysis. So one thing that we do, I mean, you can do medium risk and high risk, but I think, something that leaders might be able to go away and try is a low risk culture capture. And that might be just through the use of a couple of different question prompts. So, for example, you might ask the question, what are the three words that describe the best parts of the culture? Okay, and I think it's important that you always start from a position of strength.
And that's something you'd ask everybody?
You'd ask everybody.
Yep.
You'd ask everybody, and then you condense that data, and you're looking for unifying threads, I suppose, and present those common themes. But starting from a position of strength promotes far more emotionally intelligent behaviour. So you'd always start that way. The follow-up question to that might be something along the lines of, what is so fundamental to the culture of our organisation that it just should never change? We just should never, ever tamper with it. So now we're sort of narrowing the focus a little bit for people. And then you might offer a little bit of spice in the question. You might say something along the lines of, if you were the person with sole responsibility for driving the culture of this organisation, what might you do differently?
Good question.
We find people really enjoy grappling with that question. Sometimes you've just got to put a little bit of boundary on the question, because you don't want it to become a pile-on. So we allow people to enter the conversation pretty freely at the start, but then we really quickly try and tip them into a solutions-focused mindset. So, okay, we're going to anticipate some challenge, no doubt. How quickly can we tip into solution rather than getting caught up in complaining? Yeah. So those three questions would be a tangible takeaway that leaders could go and try straight away. Okay.
And what about then more medium term?
Yeah, more medium term, you start to then look at, so almost all organisations, as you know, have got a documented set of core values. Unfortunately, it is the case, and I'm probably speaking more macro level here, it is the case that the documented set of values aren't always the lived experience for the employees in the organisation. So more medium term, you'd start to dive in a little bit more about, well, what are our core values? Where have they come from? who's had an opportunity to contribute to the conversation. Are they just words on a page or statements on a website?
Are they still valid?
Are they still valued? Are they the bedrock of tomorrow's success? Like, are they contemporary? So
put a future focus on.
Are they future focused? Are they growth based? Are they calling forth an action? Are they one word, or do they have a compelling mantra or meme that supports them? So a big one for us is we prefer and we would support organisations to move away from a one word value, because one word doesn't really tell a story. It doesn't
be interpreted in various ways.
It can be interpreted in various ways, but it doesn't really tell me what I'm supposed to do. So we work with organisations to keep the word that you've got, but let's just bring it to life with a mantra or a meme. Now, a meme, and the actual definition of a meme is a unit of culture. So some sort of little 3 to 7 word emotionally compelling story. And that's the other thing probably, Kenton, to consider is we shouldn't be trying to appeal to the rational mind here. People's behaviour is driven at an emotional level.
Yeah.
So you want some sort of little compelling 3 to 7 word meme or mantra that compels to that emotional level. Then the extensions that would be, okay, well, what are the tangible actions? What does it look like day to day? What are the mindful agreements? What's sacred in this organisation in terms of how we behave? Mentally contrast that against how do we not behave here? And then some trackability. We need some tracking and monitoring. There needs to be a level of governance in the work as well. So building in what we would call after action review systems to, and try and habitualise those systems. Come in and have conversation about, well, we said this is who we are. How are we going? Where are we at? Why are we there? What have we learned? What are we going to do for the next 5 weeks?
Yeah. Excellent. We've been talking a lot about the influence of leadership in the culture of the school. Let's talk a little bit more about how big that responsibility is and whose responsibility is in the leadership team. And how everyone can have an effect in that.
Yeah, thanks, Kenton. I would say first and foremost, through a heightening understanding phase of the work we do, we would be really strong on acknowledging that culture is the responsibility of everybody in the organisation. And certainly when you bring a new person into the organisation, you're actually affording that person some of your cultural real estate.
Yeah.
Everywhere they walk in your organisation, they've got agency over how they choose to behave. They've got some of your cultural real estate. So I suppose the question then is, well, for the implications for the leader, I suppose, is, well, how skilled are the leaders in the organisation at influencing the behaviour that they want to see?
Because it's got to be driven by someone.
It has to be. It's got to be led. Yeah. If you don't lead culture, it will lead you.
Yeah, exactly.
Is a fantastic line that I stumbled on at some stage. But so it has to be led, and it has to be led by the demonstration of leadership behaviours. Now, I would say those things are available to everybody, but people in positions of leadership, although it's not their sole responsibility, every action is amplified and magnified, as you can imagine. One of the biggest disruptors to the work, to this work being successful, is if there's a lack of genuine commitment from the leadership team. There's a whole heap of things that work in opposition to progress here, and we certainly work with teams to outline all of those things. In fact, as part of a discovery meeting process for us, we'd be acknowledging, here's all the things that work in opposition to progress, and let's make sure wherever possible we can protect against those things. One of them is a lack of commitment from the leadership team. So we have to make sure that senior leadership team, if they're about to engage in this work, that there is a genuine appetite for the work, because they do play an amplified and magnified role. Yeah,
and we often hear that people say that culture comes from the top, but it's a little bit more defined than that. Is culture exists whether you want it or not.
Absolutely.
It's good culture is influenced from leaders.
So absolutely, and they play a massive role, and it exists at multiple different layers as well. I mean, it's reasonably complex, as you can imagine, and we see our role as helping organisations take the path of least resistance, basically. So, it exists at the level of the organisation, it exists at the level of the micro teams within the organisation, and it exists at the level of the individual within the organisation. So part of our process is sort of trying to work at all of those different levels. And as you can imagine, working at the level of the entire organisation is challenging, really quite challenging, particularly if the organisation is quite big, because the behaviour of human beings doesn't scale very well. So working at the level of the micro teams, and then even down to the level of the individual, is where you get the opportunity to really influence the work.
Okay, so bigger challenge in larger schools?
Not necessarily. It just depends on how they choose to go about the work. The bigger challenge is when we're asked to facilitate for, say, 100 to 200 people. That's quite challenging. Now, that's not to say that's not a good thing to do. At times, if the school's committed to ongoing work over a long time, at times the right thing to do is to go back out to the whole organisation and really clearly and transparently communicate, well, this is where we're up to, and from here we'll be breaking back into small teams.
And that's where those activation teams are so important.
The activation teams, absolutely.
Okay.
But the ideal, I think, is, is basically one team at a time. That's ideal. Now, that's not always doable, of course, but you've got to name an ideal still.
Yeah. Oh, bro. Yeah. Well, absolutely fascinating topic. And like you said, the culture is something we're all part of. Yeah. And let's hopefully that something we've talked about today is really going to help leaders out there to really influence positive and culturing in their schools and as an ongoing process. So
beautiful.
Thank you for your time today, Matt.
Thanks for having me, Kenton. Thank you. Enjoyed it. Thank you.
And that's a wrap for this episode of the Business of School podcast. We've enjoyed the conversation today and would love to have you join us for future episodes. Please hit the subscribe button and follow the links below to find more information and resources to support you and your school team. Until next time, keep being innovative, keep being awesome, and remember, there is always opportunity to improve on the journey. Thanks for connecting.